Hi, Alexis. How are you
Hi,
today?
David. Good,
Hi there.
thanks.
Nice
Yeah,
to meet you.
you too.
Good. So I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Uh-huh.
So just to paint for the listener a kind of a general sort of outline of where you are in the world.
Uh, I stay in northeast Scotland, in the sort of the northeast corner of Scotland, you would say, about 30 miles west of Aberdeen, in the countryside of rural Aberdeenshire, quite close to the Cairngorms National Park, in a small village called Lumsden.
And then just a kind of quick summary of your kind of connection to the stone world.
Well, we moved up here about 4 years ago, I think it was, and I was straight away amazed at how the buildings and landscape is full of stone construction, um, which instantly got me interested in how it's done and such. Um, I grew up in Kent, and it's just mainly bricks there, or some flint or ragstone walls, so I wasn't really aware of it. So a small walling firm had some space on larger projects for a waller to try out, and just got involved that way and got hooked, I guess.
The way it tends to happen is once you've had a go at it, you're hooked.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so you say you haven't always been there. You grew up in Kent then.
Grew up in Kent, yeah. So the far southeast of the UK to the far northeast, and just moved up here because my partner had a good job opportunity and just wanted to get involved in, I suppose, work in the landscape. I've always enjoyed working outdoors. So it seemed like a great opportunity, and yeah.
And she works at the Scottish Sculpture Workshop.
She's the director at the Scottish Sculpture Workshop.
Okay. Yeah, I went there to complete a part of a project a few years ago, and it must have been just before she came because it was a guy, I can't remember his name, but he was just the way to leave. So I guess she got his position. It's quite a good setup there.
It is. I think they're all about experimentation and allowing artists to sort of develop their practice in sort of in a rural setting, which is important. So a lot of them come from big cities such as Glasgow or London, or from overseas, and there's really great facilities there and very knowledgeable technicians. So I think people learn a lot and take that into their practice.
And is it something you kind of partake of?
Well, I get roped into helping out quite a bit, and have myself there taught some introductory stone workshops, yeah, which has been really great and well received.
Okay, and then so what's your kind of your earlier background? Because you said you're 40 now, so and you've only been up here
Really?
for the last 3 years. So what's your background?
My background is in, I suppose, so cycle industry stuff, particularly teaching people to repair bikes and campaigning for more people to cycle. So I've mainly been hidden in workshops, repairing bikes, but then I got more interested in teaching people to actually do it themselves, and yeah, explore the world by bicycle.
Was that something you got into straight after school, or was that because you were a keen cyclist yourself?
Well, I studied environmental management at Leeds, so I've always had an interest in trying to make the world a better place, I suppose, through mobilizing skills and helping people learn in the environment. Cycling, I've just been a passion of mine. It's just flow and creativity, I guess, when you're actually cycling, and helping more people cycle is really a rewarding sort of career path.
So was it town cycling or mountain biking or
I think
road
mountain
racing?
biking, or not racing. No, I'm not an especially competitive type, and people end up crashing, and then that's the end of your career pretty early on with road racing. No, mountain biking is still probably my passion because it gets you out into nature and away from traffic and the distractions of modern life, I suppose.
Certainly, when I was a keen cyclist when I grew up, I mean, um, I loved going out on my bike, but it was just kind of meandering around the back roads. I loved doing that, but I kind of wish mountain biking had been a kind of sport when I was younger. It was just kind of coming on because it looks like great fun, but I definitely wouldn't try it now. It looks a bit too scary.
Oh, I don't take too many risks now. It's mostly farm tracks and forestry roads that I take, but it keeps me fit.
And so, did you have your own workshop then?
Yes, I had my own workshop, but I also like to work with other people. I work with London Bike Kitchen in Hoxton and Look Mum No Hands, which combined a cycle cafe and sort of an event space combined with a workshop. So it was a highly social kind of workshop environment and very friendly compared to some bike establishments can be a little bit rude.
Not for the amateur then.
No, not particularly wanting to share the art of fixing bikes with others, let's say.
And so, were you doing that right up until the time that your partner got the opportunity up at Lumsden?
More or less, yeah. I mean, we moved up here, and I was responsible. I was the main father in charge. I was in charge of looking after our daughter, essentially. So that was harder than working, actually.
How old is she?
She's 5.5 now. But when we were here, she was just 1 when we moved up here. So it was a lot of mother and toddler groups, which everyone's quite welcoming. But I found it quite tough, and I kind of missed working. But I'm still very involved. Second one on the way.
So, well, it goes by very quickly. Let me tell you, my youngest was 22 last week. It makes me feel very old.
Yeah, that's what they say.
So, had you ever contemplated stone or rock? Had that kind of featured in any way as part of your life before?
I guess not. No, not especially. I guess I've always been interested in art and creativity and repair and making something new out of bits from my career in the cycle making industry. But stone, I'd not really had much contact with the material whatsoever. No, so it was very new for me. Yeah.
And so then when you moved up to rural Aberdeenshire, you were obviously just surrounded by the walls and the buildings.
Yeah, once you start noticing it, it's absolutely everywhere. And also the Neolithic stuff, the ancient sort of stone circles, all that stuff is amazing too, and the Pictish carved stones. So it's a whole world you become inured to. Uh-huh.
And was that something you picked up on quite quickly?
Mm-hmm, yeah. I mean, we stayed in Rhynie when we first moved up here, which is a centre for Pictish community, with an ancient hill fort called the Tapanoff, and loads of carved stones here, there, and everywhere. So it's very quickly interested in that. Yeah.
So the opportunity to come and work with a stonemason waller, you were looking for that, or it came along at the right time?
It came along at the right time, and I was definitely looking to learn a traditional skill that would make me feel more settled, I suppose, or involved in the landscape in which we found ourselves.
You were getting fed up with the mother and toddler groups.
Well, lifting stones is easier than lifting a squirming toddler, that's for sure.
So did you apply, and then what sort of work were you doing?
Initially, it was kind of labouring, sorting stone and helping prepare foundations. I knew the Waller, but through mutual friend already, so there wasn't really applying as such. So I just got involved, initially labouring, as I say, which was tough at first, but
takes a bit of getting used to.
A bit of getting used to, and then you start stacking the stone and learning the guidelines, and I guess the stone starts teaching you, really. Yeah.
So were you being kind of formally trained up, or
no?
Just you're an extra pair of hands, and just every meter that you can put up is a meter he doesn't have to.
Kind of, yeah. Just kind of cuffed when you're getting it wrong. But no, it was great to have the opportunity. It was absolutely fantastic to have the opportunity to learn. I mean, grateful for that opportunity, and it's gone from there really. As I say, well.
And what sort of projects were you working on? New builds, repairs?
Quite a lot of variety. A fair amount of commercial work where I suppose planning consent is given more easily when traditional stone walls and features are put into housing developments. So yeah, in some cases they'd be like, "Whoa, there's so many walls everywhere in this housing estate. It looks kind of odd, to be honest, but actually it softens it and makes it look like it belongs, the new housing development.
Grounds it in the landscape.
But also we did a big new boundary wall, I think 200 or maybe 450 meters of field stone wall for a new cemetery expansion. That's for the council on Prince Charles's estate, I think it was. Yeah, that was near Ballater. Quite a variety of things. New builds for private companies, for an ice cream berry shop, Barra Berries, in Old Meldrum. I think a repair for Historic Environment Scotland of a Neolithic stone circle. I mean, lots
of variety.
Lots of variety, and that's good. Different sorts of stone. It varies so much across the county and across Scotland. I think we did some work in Sutherland as well, and that was a completely different, because of the geology. The land changes over a fault. It's completely different stone when you cross over. So it's like picking up this really light sandstone, which we weren't used to.
It'd be all granite in Aberdeen, mostly.
Predominantly granite, yeah, or metamorphic stone. I mean, that's the other thing. Learning about the geology is really, it's a whole world I'm learning about.
I must admit, it's one of the things I tried in my earlier on in my career to learn about, but I found it one of the most difficult and dry subjects. I thought I used to have a book at the side of my bed, and if I couldn't, it was a geology book, and if I couldn't sleep, I would try to read a chapter, and it always got me off.
I've got one of those. It works a treat, yeah. I mean,
it's all the different, very hard to say kind of terminology, and trying to get to grips to that. And I do actually hope to have a geologist on soon. So I'm looking forward to having.
I look forward to that. Yeah.
And so, did you adapt to the walling and to stonework quite easily? Did you find that transition from your mindset before to the kind of more practical, hands-on graft that is stonework?
Yeah, fairly easy. You start to have more good days than bad, and then you realise, I think maybe after sort of 9 months or so, it was starting to be more good days than bad. And on the bad days, you make a mistake, and that's alert. That I treat that as a lesson, sort of thing, on the bad days. And I was certainly chapping my fingers quite a lot to begin with. Learning the hard way that way. I might have broken my thumb, but you can never tell with a thumb. Lost a few fingernails, and
that's kind of a rite of passage, I think.
I think so. Your blood, sweat, and tears really go into the learning process, I think. I think it's hard to know to compare myself with. Although I don't know that many wallers, but I'm beginning to learn more. So I don't know whether I was quick or slow or in between. It's hard to know, but I'm happy enough with my progress.
How early on in playing about with stone do you think that you kind of felt, yeah, this is something I could really kind of dedicate my efforts towards? I'm getting something really rewarding from this.
Well, I suppose it feels it's properly immersive work once you get into it, and you get into a state of like sort of flow, I suppose, and time just passes, and by the end of it, you've fixed a gap or built a new stretch without really thinking about it, and feeling really sort of, I don't know, satisfied and like you've done a proper day's work. and healthier, I guess, afterwards. So yeah, quite early on, I noticed my health improving. After, as I say, after about 9 months or so of working outdoors and feeling this skill building, physical and mental skill improving, actually handling the material, and so yeah, after about 9 months, I thought, yeah, I could keep going at this and make a living. And there seems to be a lot of demand for it, or an increasing demand even. So,
did you respond to it in any other way than just the kind of practical? Was it something that kind of seeped into you?
I suppose it was as much practical as it is. It's as much practical as it is mental, I suppose. Like learning that skill and bringing out that creativity in me. And learning from others, I suppose, in all directions, and learning from the stone. It feels very grounding. It's definitely more than physical.
Yeah, I just think there's something that kind of it taps into something deep that's really difficult to articulate, and that only becomes apparent after a while.
It is really hard to describe, so this is quite difficult. And I suppose in my work, I want to train more people that I work with and facilitate more people just getting their hands on some stone and learning to stack it and be creative with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I kind of hope to achieve through the podcast is just to try and get across to maybe people who haven't considered it, and just how much fun and enjoyment and how much deep satisfaction they can get from just playing about with stone in which way they want to.
That's interesting, because I think fun is really an important element of all my work prior to stone as well. I think once you're having fun, that's when you start learning. And maybe some people walk past me working, and that most people are interested and say that looks. Or sometimes they say that looks really repetitive, and I'm like, oh, that must be boring. But it is fun, and I don't think it is repetitive. I mean, every day is different, but you're using.
Absolutely not. I mean, you're just. I think that's why you get into a flow state, isn't it? Because your mind is just constantly thinking, and you're thinking. It's like chess, isn't it? You're thinking 2 or 3 sort of moves ahead, and if you don't do this to this stone, or if you move this stone in this place, and that definitely kind of becomes this really kind of immersive process. That's I think is quite addictive.
Yeah, I think it is addictive, and I think being outside is really important, and it's work outdoors, and obviously you do a lot of the public work too, so there's that interaction with the public that's really important to me. And do you get it that every day someone walks past your work and says that's a real art?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you should bring that up as a point, because that's definitely something that in my own practice that I've come to really, really enjoy. And it's almost like that's the reward, is the interaction with the public, and I'm really keen if somebody stops and has a chat that I'll stand and chat, because I love that kind of feedback that you get from people that, they maybe haven't done it themselves, but they recognize the skill required, the energy that you've put into it, the commitment you've put into it. And certainly in the kind of public spaces that I work, I think that kind of gives them a kind of ownership over it. They kind of makes a connection, talking to you gives them a connection to the work that they don't if that interaction didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I really value that part of the process. I probably should charge for it, because sometimes it could be, half the day you're spending speaking to other people. But yeah, I find, I term myself a public artist, which in certain quarters has a kind of bad name, but it's something I'm really, really proud of. And I think if part of it is to be public, to share, to try and get across that passion that I have. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's proved itself over many years, what I get from people. And it's a kind of, lazy argument. People will go, it's a waste of money. But honestly, across my career, I've heard that maybe once or twice. And why would you allow that voice, that opinion, to be the dominant one over everybody else who loves the work, loves seeing that you're doing something within a public space? So, I fully recognize the worth of the type of work that I and many other people do. It's what keeps me going, because it's not the finances.
I also wanted to highlight part of the process that's important to me is using your gut feeling. Do you have that sense that you're using your instincts?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when we'll come on to the type of work that you do, but I've been incredibly lucky in that clients keep coming back to me, and they will they task me and put their trust in me to come up with something for their space, and I can only go by instinct what I think will work in that space, and that's all down to how I feel and respond to that space. So that kind of instinct is something I really listen to. Yes,
I think that's really important, and there's not a lot of work that really values or brings that out in people, and except for creative. That's the great thing about artwork, I suppose, and creative.
To me, that's the difference between a field wall and using the technique and being creative with it. It brings a whole different level of kind of input, and hopefully that people respond to that. How have you kind of been developing your own stonework then?
I think my own stonework sort of responds. I try to make my stonework responsive to obviously the context that I'm building it in. So the landscape and its sort of utility. I mean, is it for people? It should be for people, and I try to think of it across timescales, or how will this piece be used in, say, 100 years' time? So, for example, a seating area. If I'm developing a seating area now, I might think about COVID, for example.
2 meters apart.
I might do, or I might think about experimentation is really important, I suppose, as it is with your work. It's like maybe breaking the form of a traditional field wall, and being very responsive to the site and the material.
You were working alongside a kind of local firm for a while. So when did the first opportunity arrive for you to kind of put in a bit more of your own personality? Did a project, or like a friend or an acquaintance, or what was the sort of first opportunity for you to kind of explore your own personality with the technique?
Well, I guess I started volunteering with some trail maintenance, mountain bike trail maintenance group, Aberdeenshire Trail Association, and obviously there's a lot of traditional wall features within forestry, and I started repairing broken bits there, or taking the techniques and putting them into more sort of a path building context, or combining the two. And then through this group, my friend's mum crashed into a wall on his housing development, and so I was called in to fix that. So that was probably my first job. Was like, fix this mistake. I was like, yeah, I like fixing stuff. I'll give that a go. That's one of my first jobs. But that led on to like through word of mouth. Can you rebuild a friend's driveway because they're having a wedding at home? I think COVID's helped actually, because more people are doing home improvements. So people have been sat looking at a pile of stones or a really badly made wall in their garden, be like, that could have been improved, and I've been available to do it myself, sort of thing.
Yeah, I see the B&Q, their profits went up 600% last year. So yeah, everybody's been kind of stuck at home, making home improvements.
Yeah, I think the importance of the outdoors, whether it's just your little yard or patch, or national parks or roadside repairs. All of that has become more important. People have started noticing it more, I guess. So yeah, one thing led to another through word of mouth. I've got a few clients, and going forward, I'm doing more work with the civil engineers who build connections between people and the environment through improving paths and tracks, bike courses, and public seating and such like that.
So have you been able to some sort of design input into these kind of areas?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, sort of replacing sort of what they might, a traditional council-led approach or a simple approach might use a lot of concrete and glue everything together and use shop-bought materials. But I guess stone has provided the real opportunity to be creative with a local material that's there, but it's bringing my skill set into that context.
So when you say you're putting a creative input, is it in terms of how you're laying the material, or how you're the forms that you're creating with the material? Go and outline a little bit more of what your creative input is.
Yes, just looking at how a space might be used and sort of make sort of seated areas so that that the landscape is sort of shared with people more readily by making better use of it. It's hard to explain. It's reviving a traditional skill, but making it relevant to people, I suppose, and making it available to people.
Yeah, I think the sort of spaces where we all, the wider public, kind of interact. I think those are great spaces for opportunities to use stonework, especially within the landscape, and I think in urban spaces that's kind of where a lot of my work is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those offer some great opportunities to do something different, to be creative, not just to put in a kind of a bland wall. I think there's those kind of spaces just kind of fire my imagination. What can I do here? And it sounds like that's kind of the way that your mindset's going.
A lot of the time it's a blank canvas and it's a chance to start something anew. So I'm very interested in a collaborative process now that I'm working with a team of experienced civil engineers. So that's quite exciting to be sort of injecting my skills into that.
This is a new job that you have just recently won.
Yeah.
And was this through word of mouth, or did you apply for it?
I applied for it, but I'd already done some work with them before. Yeah. crc.scot.
Maybe kind of expanding the type of work that they're doing.
Yeah, so it's sort of making improvements to the environment. A lot of the time, using a focus on using natural building is what they're trying to do more of, which has been sort of missed by a lot of companies before. And that approach involves, use of what's there and what will last over gluing stone together with concrete and making something that captivates people. It's a fantastic opportunity to build some really meaningful places, I guess.
What kind of spaces are they working within? Is it kind of, you mentioned trails, or is it within the road network, parks? What kind of spaces are they working within?
Yeah, so like a recent project was an improvement to Stonehaven Boardwalk, so the seafront area at Stonehaven, which was sort of degraded and slippery boardwalk and not really making the most of the stone that was there. So we made a new seating area there. I guess connections between places, natural connections, and land stabilization projects. I suppose a lot of the work will be like climate change remediation and improvement, mitigation. There might be an amount of that. And yeah, it's work in country parks and in with landowners and forestry and such. I'm just about to start this job. I've done freelance work with them for the last 6 months.
Okay. And so at the start of a project, are you consulted about, I know obviously it's going to be difficult because you've only just started, but if they started looking at a new job, would they take on board? Would you be sitting at the table when they're kind of thinking about how to proceed with the project?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
That's a great opportunity to be given then.
And also to transfer my skills amongst the team so that we can take on bigger projects together and that learning can go in all directions. Because I feel that learning comes from the stone and the place you are and who you're with. So I mean, obviously I've got a lot more experience than some of the people I'll be working with, but I believe that anyone can be a teacher, if you see what I mean. So with my experience teaching sort of cycle mechanics, some of my students looked at ways of doing things that I hadn't done before, and I know that the same applies with stone as well. So it's that collaboration is pretty important to me as well.
Yeah, I think working with new people all the time is quite helpful because, like you say, they kind of approach the thing in a totally different way, and it kind of opens your eyes to, you sometimes you get fixed in your own methodologies. So working with other people is, even people who are less experienced than you, it kind of just maybe opens up your eyes to different possibilities. I think last year you were awarded a Winston Churchill Memorial Trust Fellowship. So shall we kind of explore what your project is for that?
I will eventually at some point go into Japan with my Winston Churchill Memorial Trust Fellowship to study community learning and craft stonework in Japan, where the craft is very, very highly practiced and regarded.
And what made you apply for the fellowship? What was the kind of inspiration for that?
Well, I guess it did me such good getting this skill and this opportunity with stone that I want to be able to share that with others, essentially. And I think I want to learn from those overseas who've got an amazing level of craft and combination of art and craft. And other people had done the Winston Churchill Memorial Fellowship, and I just thought, yeah, I'll give it a go.
Why Japan?
Japan. Well, there's quite a few artisans, craft stoneworkers out there who have really been inspired by the British tradition and have come to Britain to the Dry Stone Wall Association and gone through the qualifications and training process and taken it back to Japan and integrated it into their own version of stonework. So there's this sort of cross-cultural exchange which really interests me.
Was that something you were observing on social media?
Yeah, certainly social media, such as Instagram, is a really good place to see a lot of this work in action and this exchange. Yeah. But I'm really interested in sort of the Zen gardens and Shinto traditions and the temples and how they use stone. The reverence of stone is really, really high. And the fact that they work with nature and not on it or to it, there's that sort of like working collectively with nature. It's almost like they treat it as alive, and it's trying to understand that and work with gardeners and landscapers to try to bring that into my practice and to share that with others.
So again, was that a previous interest that sort of naturally progressed into the Winston Churchill Fellowship, or something that once you'd started working, you investigated and explored more?
Oh, kind of both, really. Yeah. I mean, I've been interested in um, the Japanese way of doing things, approach to craft in general, and the landscapes that they make there. I've been interested in that for years. But yeah, once I started to get the skills myself and be interested in sharing them, then yeah, visiting Japan. There's a dry stone walling school in Japan where they use basically they go to farms and fix in mountainous areas. They fix terraces using dry stone walling techniques, but just working with community members who want to like make the landscape better. And that's kind of what I want to help develop in Aberdeenshire and broader across the UK. Just sort of make it an everyman kind of, yeah, we can do that. Not to put myself out of work, of course, but
No, but just to share the enjoyment,
just to share
and make it
the
more
enjoyment.
Having been to a couple of festivals, stone festivals as well, there is definitely something about undertaking it as a community or as a group that is kind of magical.
Yeah. I think there's a sense of achievement of doing things as a group. I understand how working in a sort of lone wolf context and doing everything yourself is super rewarding because you know where you've placed every stone and you see the project from the beginning to the end without someone putting something in the wrong place. But that said, small teams I think are really good too because you sort of share the effort and there is that chance to make solve problems better than you might on your own.
And it's ultimately about context, isn't it?
With the Winston Churchill Fellowship, I hope to visit Okinawa, which is the southern islands in Japan, where I feel like walling is just part of what, you know, you paint your fence at home. Everyone can paint a fence, more or less. And everyone builds these coral, I think it's sort of coral stone that they use to protect their houses from typhoons. So it's like a folk tradition or a folk craft that almost lots of people engage with, I imagine. But I'd like to go and find out and be involved.
Which probably means there's lots of different types of results as well.
Sure. Yeah. So the more mistakes are made, the better the good work becomes, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the things, you know, I think about stonework is it's just such a simple technique that most people can they will have a go at it, but it also allows you to kind of put in your own personality to it. And we went round, we went up to Thurso to George Gunn's Stonefest a few years ago, and then we went round the North 500, and we just travelled about that for a couple of days, and it was almost like every corner you turned, there was a different type of walling and, you know, a different style. It wasn't kind of regimented and exactly the same. It was almost like you could imagine that was Frank up the road and that was Jimmy, and you know, and they were all slightly different. And to me, they were all kind of putting in their own kind of personality and their own kind of. They were having fun with it. That's why, and I think that's the kind of approach that I kind of really respond to.
And
you know, not kind of be dictatorial about what the finished result should be.
No, and in that way, the walls, I suppose, and the product of people's creativity has sort of gives it life, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's when I see it slightly different, it's something different. It makes me smile. You know, you think, oh, that's good. Yeah, it probably wouldn't be the way I would put it.
Even the mistakes make me smile sometimes now that I notice them much more than I used to, and I see my own mistakes in earlier work, and it makes me smile, especially if it's still standing.
Well, I was going to say that as well, you know, because some of these dikes have obviously, you know, they definitely probably wouldn't even, you know, pass this level 1 certificate, but they're still standing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how did you find the fellowship sort of application process. Did you sweat over that for months?
Yes.
3 hours.
Well, yeah.
I'm not being flippant about that.
No, I found the interview process was great, and when I actually got in the room with the panel, it was really just a fantastic conversation and really great to get to that stage. So by that point, I was happy. Although I did have one of those dreams of being late. Literally the night before, I was like dreamt that I was racing to get there and woke up in a sweat. But yeah, I did sweat over the application process because it's important. It's very important to me, and it's a real honour to have actually won it. So yeah, I put a lot of weight on it, I guess.
Yeah. And how close were you to travelling before COVID hit? Was everything all kind of lined up?
Yeah, well, I won the award in March 2020, and I was looking set to travel in June for 7 weeks. So yeah, it was cut off within sort of a month and a half of winning the opportunity. But it can wait. It can wait down the line. It's not, Japan's not going away. If anything, our trading and cultural relationship with Japan might be improving. So it may be. So
you're in constant contact with people in Japan?
Yeah.
So is that just translating on text, or
well, I haven't learned much Japanese. I find it very tricky. I've got a few basic resources, and I'm trying, but some of the correspondence English is really good. So we stick with English most of the time.
Well, I'm hoping to get a Taiwanese stonemason on, and we were kind of corresponding by text last week. It's quite amazing what you can do with the translation services now. So,
but I mean, that's why it's important to actually go there rather than do anything virtually, because I feel like to actually communicate by actually building together would be amazing, even if we can't. Our language isn't perfect. By sort of by being on the ground and handling the material and seeing how it's done and taking part, that would be a really interesting form of communication as well.
And is it mostly kind of Japanese kind of walling that you're hoping to kind of learn and see, or are you interested in the kind of the sort of that kind of Japanese style of the ramparts, the large stone?
Yeah, both. Yeah, I mean, the castle ramparts and the burdock piling they call it. That's amazing too. I mean, it's very. There's a lot of difference in technique and approach. Say, for example, the traditional dry stone walling association, field walling, and there's also like making stone flooring as well, patios as such, and the Zen garden, the landscaping down to gravel and how they use gravel, and then the large boulders and how they're placed. Because I would like to bring this into my work without sort of cultural appropriation, you might say. I'd like to actually get a real understanding of what stone means to the Japanese culture.
It always amazes me what they can do in small spaces, how creative and experimental they can be with the material, the way they kind of mix and match between the the soft landscaping and the hard materials. I think is very kind of exciting.
Oh, absolutely, and that's interesting how they bring it into urban spaces and urban yards. They bring like miniaturize things and sort of bring the Japanese landscape to smaller urban contexts, and I'd definitely be interested in more of that sort of work.
There's a German guy that is on Facebook called Christopher Lux. I don't know if you.
I think so. Yeah.
So I kind of follow his work, and just
really good.
Just how he kind of plays about with the materials is good fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so your ambitions then, when after your travels, or until your travels happen, and after the after you return, what's those kind of ambitions?
Well, it might be a couple of years before realistically I can get out to Japan. So until then, it's just practice and improving the practice of the civil engineering firm that I'll be working with, and helping friends learn, experimenting with the sculpture workshop. I'd really like to sort stone. I'd like the space. It's wishful thinking, perhaps, but to be able to have huge different bins of different sorts of stones, so that we can practice splitting stone and we can make nice flat bits, or properly round, almost spherical stone, and see what we can do with that. So yeah, I'd like to spend some time organizing and getting ready for Japan. Subsequently, after that, maybe step up the community workshop efforts.
So that sort of learning and teaching to other people is very important to you then.
Super important.
Is that more important than expanding your own kind of business practice?
No, it's equally as important. I think that making work for other people I suppose that is the most important thing, but it's been an equal player in that.
I must admit, from my own perspective, sort of teaching has never kind of really featured in. I haven't done any teaching, the odd workshop maybe, but it's not something that I'm attracted to. But I think it's really interesting that other people are.
I think it's a challenge, and I'm always interested in a challenge, and it pushes me. But until I'm really competent to do that regularly, I just want to keep practicing and working away and making some amazing public spaces using natural building techniques. So yeah, it's a great opportunity with CRC to focus on that.
Yeah, I think my own kind of approach has always been to explore my own creativity, and if I inspire anybody else other than through that, I think that's kind of where I see that fits my personality. Say,
you've inspired me anyway. So I really enjoyed reading your report for the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust, and it was like, oh wow, so crafts people and stoneworkers are attractive to the program. So I'll give it a shot. So thanks for that. Yeah.
Oh well, there you go.
Yeah.
That makes me smile. So probably coming close to the end now. What's your kind of? Have you got any other projects that's kind of, where you're placing your focus just now?
Surviving the pandemic.
Yeah, but I'm struggling to do that. I've been waiting to go onto site for such a long time, and we went on site on Monday, and I'm sitting here on Friday because they're not ready for me yet. So,
there's a lot of restrictions. So I think it's just like I suppose it's exciting that there's a few more estates in Scotland becoming interested in conservation. So I'm trying to make those connections and improve that. So it's controversial, any sort of change, but I think they're actually trying to change back to more of a rewilding kind of approach, and obviously improving or repairing stone features such as walls is great for ecological reasons. So I'm making more connections with maybe John Muir Trust. Certain local estates, as I say, are more conservation minded and rewilding minded, such as the Glenfeshie estate. So yeah, I'm looking to do more of that.
And are you quite proactive with that?
I guess, yeah. Yeah.
You kind of
knock on doors.
Knock on doors. I'm very poor at that. It's something that I'm trying to work upon.
Well, I don't think you've got too much to lose. People just say no or ignore you, and I'm got used to that. But sometimes, occasionally, someone says yes, and it starts an amazing project. So, yeah, that's.
I do think that the pandemic has actually opened up lots of new possibilities. I think people are definitely thinking about the public spaces, and I think the importance of green spaces and leisure spaces. That's all definitely come to the fore, that how important those are.
Yeah, and sort of respecting the environment and improving it is beneficial to everyone and prevents health crises happening in the first place. So I think people are going to be outdoors more and understanding and learning what it means to be part of the universe, I guess, and that's what stone can do for you.
Yeah,
it's really hard. It's very hard to describe.
Well, we've
made a hash of it.
We've had a good conversation anyway today. So we'll probably wrap up and call it a day at that. And I'm really looking forward to reading your report once you've actually been out to Japan. I think that will be amazing. I would love to go to Japan. I'd love to see the stonework. And what I'd really like to do I would like to culturally appropriate and do a rampart walling. I'd love to have a go at that.
Well, maybe we can have a collaboration on that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I met a Japanese master craftsman, Suminari Awata, in Dallas. He was building a base to the Rolex building in Dallas. Just amazing. Just great big massive rocks. I just love to have a go at that. So yeah, maybe we can have a go at that together. Yeah. One of the things that's really interesting for me in the podcast is that everybody's coming to stonework from a totally different direction, and then they just kind of find themselves. And I think that's a really important story to tell.
Okay.
And I also I think it's really interesting that you don't just see it as walls. You're thinking of learning, teaching, environment. I don't think in that way. I think in urban spaces because that's my training. That's where I'm coming from, and I think that I love to hear that. It kind of expands my mind, and learning and hearing about that from people is just great. And I think hopefully other people are getting something out of that too.
And I didn't underplay my new career opportunity because literally this is just since we last spoke that this job opportunity came up, and I was like, it's not purely walling, and maybe I should have said that, but it will put me in charge of bringing more walling and creative stonework to the civil engineering project. So
I think that's a great opportunity, especially if you can be sitting at the table and saying, well, look, bringing a stone mind to the solution, I think is really important. Because I don't think people, movers and shakers, don't think about it. It's kind of one of the points I make in my report. Trying to get the movers and shakers to. Stone was always the solution before. The main solution until manufactured materials came along, and now it's just. What can we buy at B&Q's? What can we buy at the merchants?
Oh.
They don't think about stone as the most appropriate, least,
because it doesn't all fit on a Euro pallet in uniform blocks, does it?
Exactly.
It requires a creative mind to turn it from an irregular block to something useful.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and again, it's interesting to hear that you are proactive. I mean, I am the least proactive guy in the world because I've never had to be, for some reason projects come and it's kind of allowed me to keep a career going over 30 years. It's, but it's not a great business model. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
All right. Well, thank you. It's been great speaking to you and a great opportunity. Yeah.
Okay. So we shall say goodbye.
All right.
So thanks, Alexis, for your time.
Thanks, David.
I'll take it from there. Thanks then.
Okay. Bye.